Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolutely stunning text called Stars, Her, that does something completely unique. It takes the cold, vast, mathematically rigorous laws of astrophysics, and it maps them directly onto the warmth and the messy complexity of human intimacy. It's a brilliant, brilliant look at how the universe functions, and exactly how we function within it.
Think about this for a second. Can the exact same physical laws that govern how a star evolves and eventually ignites actually dictate how two human beings collide and connect? It sounds crazy, but today we're going to look at the data that suggests the answer is a resounding yes.
All right, Section 1, the baseline of parallax. To really get this, we've got to meet our two main anchors. We have Mara, an astrophysicist who seeks hard truth in star charts and cosmic mechanics. And then we have Soren, a philosopher of physics, a guy who's actively trying to find some sense of peace and understand reality after surviving the brutal, compressing trauma of a war. Okay, let's dive into this. Parallax. It's basically Astronomy 101. If you want to prove something is actually out there in the dark, you observe it from position A. Then you wait, and you observe it again from position B. That shift in the angle gives you the precise distance of the object. It mathematically proves that something is really there. Now, what's fascinating is how this exact science maps to their relationship. Mara experienced this profound identity-dissolving isolation out in an Icelandic field, right? Meanwhile, Soren experienced the absolute trauma of becoming practically nothing in a military trench. These two extreme, opposite coordinates give them a massive baseline. And in physics, the larger the baseline between 2 points of observation, the more precise the measurement of the connection. So, once parallax proves a star is actually there, we have to break open its light. This is the spectrum. A star's spectrum reveals everything: its composition, its temperature, velocity, age, all entirely encoded in the light it gives off. Just like reading a star, reading another person's subtle behavioral signals, like the way they hold their hands or the specific kind of silence they offer, well, that reveals their true internal nature. Let's look at how this builds with a concept studied by Mara's father, the fine structure constant. It's roughly 1/137. It's this seemingly arbitrary, totally dimensionless ratio that the universe just left entirely unexplained. But the wild thing is, without this specific random number, atoms and life literally could not form. Sometimes exact, unexplained conditions are just required for anything to exist at all. Moving right along to Section 2, the physics of almost. Here, we're shifting focus to Mara's groundbreaking research on stellar nurseries. She is absolutely fascinated by the agonizingly long quiet phase before a star formally ignites. You know how the sky doesn't just instantly snap to black, it progresses. You go from civil twilight to nautical twilight to astronomical twilight, and then finally to actual dark. The almost dark has its own distinct, measurable phases, and it's so much like the gradual, super careful formation of a relationship before it becomes fully realized. In the astrophysics world, this phase is the protostar. It's the honest middle before a star officially forms. It is not a star yet, but, and this is absolutely crucial, it is not a star. After the war, Soren spent 5 highly compressed, dense years in this exact state. He was in an honest middle, holding all that weight, just waiting for ignition. Which brings us to Mara's massive, incredibly bold hypothesis. The almost is itself. The moment before a star ignites isn't just some lesser prequel to the fire. No, it is a fully realized phase with its own valid, completely distinct physical laws. Okay, so to really grasp this, we got to talk about teleology. I know, big word, makes some physicists a little uncomfortable. It's basically the way a system with zero actual intention nonetheless proceeds with the absolute accuracy of intention. Think of a collapsing pre-stellar core. It moves perfectly as if toward ignition, without actually having a clue where it's going. It's pure approach. We usually use all this violent vocabulary when we talk about romance, right? Fireworks, explosions, colliding. But physics gives us a much more accurate framing, the phase transition. Instead of a violent explosion, it's about expanding gracefully into another state, like water gently expanding into vapor. It's the quiet, continuous alignment of two people finally settling into a shared space. Section 3, the observer effect. Now we're wading into Soren's philosophical territory. He's studying the epistemology of observation, asking the massive question of whether we can ever truly separate ourselves from what we are looking at. Soren actually grounds all this complex physics in his mother's philosophy, perfectly captured by this Simone Weil quote: "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity, because giving someone your raw, unperforming attention doesn't just passively watch them, it inherently changes them." This perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding the divide in how we view the universe. The classical view assumes you can have this neutral, detached observation from outside a system. But the quantum view, it tells us the real truth. The observer and the observed are completely inseparable. Observing a system alters what you're observing, and it permanently changes you, the observer, too. So the real takeaway here is the view from inside. We are literally trying to understand the container while we're stuck inside the container. You and I, right now, are inside the system. You can't just step outside of reality to measure it. Mara realizes that stellar ignition isn't a transition we neutrally watch from the outside. It's a revelation from the inside. All right, section 4, binary systems and barycenters. This is the climax of our story, tracking Maria and Soren's move from being individual, isolated protostars into a deeply shared gravitational orbit together in Oslo. Let's just immediately bust a massive romantic myth right now: the solitary lone star. If you actually look at the data, the vast majority of stars in the observable universe exist in pairs or multiples. They aren't alone. They are completely bound together by mutual gravity. So how do they actually orbit? It's all about the barycenter. This is the invisible center of mass between two stars. They don't actually orbit each other. They orbit this shared invisible point. Two stars generate and sustain a point of gravity that would just instantly vanish if either one of them walked away. For Mara and Soren, this invisible pull, it actually physically manifests as the shared wall in their new apartment. Their perfectly integrated library, where physics, philosophy, and poetry literally sit side by side, becomes one continuous conversation. It's a system they built to metabolize reality together. So why do we constantly map our myths and stories onto the stars? It isn't because we're afraid of the vastness. As Mara says, story is how we metabolize the real. Narrative is the exact, precise tool our specific human intelligence uses to process the massive, overwhelming weight of existence. And here is the absolute kicker: the scientific and emotional conclusion of the whole shebang. The almost was always the star. The years of waiting, the deep trauma, the heavy compression, none of that was a prelude to something else. They were already the star, burning from the inside all along. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. If the universe doesn't wait for neutral observation, and if attention really is the purest form of generosity, what reality are you bringing into existence right now, just by paying attention? Something to think about as you navigate your own orbit today. Thanks for joining me.